I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. How do brands really live in our minds? According to Ulli Applebaum, it's all about associations, the complex web of meanings and emotions that define how people see your brand. This week, we're talking to international strategy veteran and author of The Science of Brand Associations, Ulli Applebaum, who shares how we can use science, not guesswork, to build brands that stick. My interview with Ulli is coming right up. But first...
Hey marketers, Deborah Eckerling here.
And I'm Keith Smith, and we host the MPN Meta Marketing Show, which is not just another marketing podcast, but the marketing podcast about all the other marketing podcasts.
Podcasts are booming, right? We love them, and people actually listen. They don't scroll, they don't swipe, well, except maybe during the ad breaks.
But here's the secret. With the Marketing Podcast Network, your ads don't make people hit skip. We put your brand on shows that people actually want to hear.
That's right. We match your message with podcasts that make marketing nerds like us perk up and take notes, or at least nod knowingly, pretending they understand.
And don't worry, because we'll deliver your ad naturally. People might even think that we love your brand personally, which of course we totally do, unless it's a veggie smoothie, then maybe not.
If you want your brand heard without making listeners roll their eyes,
head to marketingpodcasts.net and catch marketing fans at work, rest, and play. Seriously, your audience is already listening. Make sure they hear your brand and not our awkward jokes.
Join the conversation, because good ads shouldn't just be tolerated, they should be enjoyed.
Yes!
This episode is brought to you by Voco Hotels by IHG, where you should prepare to be charmed. From Chicago to Myrtle Beach to Saranac Lake, each Voco in the U.S. has its own local flavor and unique detail. Our hosts welcome you with little extras, and you'll find rooms for catching up on me time and full-service bars and restaurants that are perfect for us time. Come on in and live the Voco life and book your next stay at vocohotels.com. VOCO hotels.com.
Ulli Applebaum, welcome back to On Brand. It's been a minute.
It has. Thanks for having me again, Nick. Really good to see you.
So I am really intrigued by this idea of brand associations, because just when I think, after nearly 600 episodes of the On Brand podcast, that we've talked about all the different ways that you can slice, dice, look at brands, this idea of associations is one that I find intriguing on its own, to say nothing of the fact that it is rooted in science, which I think too often we get, as you note, into guesswork. So how did the idea present itself to you?
Well, it's with a lot of head scratching, to be honest with you, because to your point, when I decided to look into brand association, my first place to go was Amazon, obviously, right? And see, okay, who has written anything about that? And what really surprised me, Nick, is that there is not one single book on Amazon, and Amazon has millions of books that focuses on brand associations, or that even has brand associations in its title. And yet, when you look at brand associations in the world of marketing, the concept has been present for something like 30 years. In the late 90s, people like Keller, academics like Keller or David Aker, started to use the concept to explain their brand equity model and these kind of things. When you look at, organization like the Ehrenberg Bass Institute in Australia, which is sort of like one of the thought leaders in evidence-based marketing, they use very similar concepts. So everyone is using the concept, but no one literally decided to shed a light on it and explain what it is. And so once I started so at first I thought, okay, I don't need to write a book about that. No one else has written a book about that. And then I was like, well, maybe actually that is a reason to write a book about it. And started to dig deeper into sort of like the science. And scientifically, we know since 20, 30, 40 years how the brain works, how memories are formed in the brain, what contributes to strong memories. And that's what brand associations really are. They are memory networks, memory structures in your brain. And, I believe fundamentally that if you don't have a memory about a brand, you don't have a brand, period. You know what I mean? So an example I used recently is like, are you familiar with the brand Jaja in Indonesia? You're probably going to say, no, I've never heard of this brand. Well, for my point is, because you have no association, no memories with that, this brand doesn't exist. Now, the second point is Jaja really doesn't exist, but that's a secondary point I'm trying to make. So, and the interesting, a lot of science focuses on, how memories are formed, what promotes them, how to strengthen them. And a lot of research companies like Kantar and Ipsos and others, they use this as the core of their thought leadership frameworks that they're selling to their clients without ever pointing the finger at that. So I figured, okay, no one has written about it. Everyone uses it. It's literally hiding in plain sight. So let me be the one who curates a book about brand associations. But then also, it's not simply theory and data. Then it also includes a lot of scorecards and try to be very pragmatic and focused on how can I use this in my day-to-day work when managing brands. So I try to be very praxis focused.
I think that's really important too, and I'm glad that you mentioned the scorecards and the pragmatism behind all of this, because the other idea that you talk about that I really like is you call brand associations the operating system of successful brands. What does that end up looking like? And I love that you are focused on the day-to-day, pragmatism, scorecarding of this, because I think a lot of times it is easy to get kind of stuck in theory when it comes to brands.
Yes. And to be honest, I'm a practitioner. So I love the theory. I love to understand the frameworks and how things work. But if it doesn't help me in my day-to-day job, it's pointless. I mean, Saturday night, we can sit in front of a fireplace, smoke a cigar, drink a whiskey, and theorize about, frameworks that are not applicable. I look for things that I can actually use in my day-to-day work. And the operating system really, in the sense, so science shows us that, memories are stored, neuroscience, in different parts of the brain based on the type of memory. So let's say a semantic memory, something, a company claims, a benefit claim, will be stored in a different part of your brain than your personal experience with a specific brand. It will be stored in a different part of the brain, but connected to each other. If the brand name is associated, right? So those are elements. And what your operating system does, it manages these different parts of the brain and orchestrates this information, but then also helps you organize it so that when I say, McDonald's, you think automatically about the Archers, you think about, Happy Meal, you think about last time you went with your family. All this information just comes back together because your brain grabs the info from the different parts in your brain and brings it back top of mind. So when you think McDonald's, all of a sudden, like, ooh, I could use a burger for lunch. All of a sudden, you have the interest in going there. Or if you're on a road trip, maybe we should stop at the next McDonald's. And so that's why I also look at it as, actually, someone mentioned it as described it as an operating system, and I really liked it because it shows you how brands are formed and work in the brain of our consumers. And that's our job: create these memories, help build these memories. And as I said, we know exactly what to do. We don't need to guess. The science is there, the data is there to prove it. So it's literally a no-brainer in a sense.
So memory and associations, it's kind of naturally something that invites us to look back, like with the McDonald's example. But in planning associations for your brand, what does that look like tactically, looking forward? If you are one of those brands that thinks, boy, I don't have that McDonald's level association that people have, where do you start?
Well, you start with the consumer again, right? And so the interesting thing is, why do associations matter? Because research shows us and data shows us that when you are in a moment of purchase, the brand that will come to mind first with the right associations is the brand that will be picked. And it's the brand that's going to succeed. So your job as a marketer is really first to make sure that these associations are fresh and come to mind quickly, but most importantly, identify those associations that will create either brand preference or that will get consumers to say, out of the three options I have at the shelf today, I'm going to pick this one because I associate it with, I don't know, whatever, healthy but tasty, making stuff up here. Um, so your job as a marketer, and that's the job of the brand positioning, right? The brand positioning is really just defining your desired brand associations, the associations you want to create and form with your offering. So what you're looking for is, what are the core drivers in the category? What drives preference? How do you get consumers to, what do you have to associate with your offering for consumers to prefer you over competition? So the process, a strategic process, is very similar, understanding the benefit ranking, the need states, all these kind of things. But then limit them to a couple of them to make it manageable and try to tie them to your brand by communicating it, repeating it, communicating it in an emotional way, etc. So there are plenty of tricks to strengthen a memory in the brain of consumers. And so that next time the consumer, goes into a purchase situation, he thinks about, I remember seeing that brand. I liked what I heard about them. That really sounds interesting. I'm going to pick it. I'm going to buy it. So that's really what you're at the core is like define which association will create brand preference for your consumers when they are in a moment of purchase. That's really what sounds simple. It's not as simple as it sounds, but the task is simple. It's hard to achieve, but the task is simple.
Right. I've got another a question that's kind of stumping me, but I'm thinking you'll probably have a good answer for me. So we talk about associations. We talk about the happy McDonald's memories. What role do negative associations play with this? I mean, my gut tells me, that's not a good thing. But how does that fit into the brand association operating system?
So principally, negative brand associations basically are killer for your brand because there are reasons not to buy your brand. I don't know, it might be the ingredients, it might be something the brand did, it might be something why you have an aversion, a bad experience you'd had with the brand, something that prevents you from buying this brand. Now, this is sort of like the starting point. The question then is always to ask yourself, who has a purchase barrier towards my brand, and how important is that segment for my brand success? And I'm talking about here, you're probably still familiar with the American Eagle Sweeney scandal. A lot of people, pushed back on this campaign. Those are barriers, right? I'm never going to buy you because it's racist, because it's sexist, because blah, 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 blah. It doesn't look like the brand has suffered from it because the loud voices are not the buyers. So that's why I'm saying, look at who your buyers are. A few years ago, we had Chick-fil-A as well, right? Chick-fil-A, very strong in their religious belief, closed on Sundays, do not support gay organizations, etc., etc. And you might agree or disagree with it. That's not the point. It acts as I don't identify with the values of this company. I'm not going to go and shop at Chick-fil-A in the future. Then you see the success of this brand. It's mind-blowing. So make sure you understand who are the people that have negative barriers and do they matter to your brand. Now, if the consumers matter, then there are different ways to approach this, right? It can be a misinformation. The consumer has a misperception about your brand, and you try to correct it, to rectify it. Emotions play a huge role because McDonald's is a great example, right? And McDonald's in the US, in the last sort of like 10, 15 years, there was a lot of pushback against the quality of the food, against, sexual harassment complaints within the organization. So there was a lot of negative things coming up against McDonald's. You cannot fight that with rationals, but we want all our lawsuits, or the food is not as bad as you think if you eat it as part of a regular diet. Consumers don't care about these arguments. How did they fix it? They realized that each consumer has a personal experience with McDonald's. And each consumer, we've all been to McDonald's, let's face it, and we all have our preferred order. I always go to McDonald's, have my preferred order. We all do that. And so McDonald's was smart enough to realize this emotional connection we have with the brand is something we can leverage to rekindle the affinity and the positive associations consumers have with the brand. Now, then they took this great Korean K-pop band, and the celebrities to show that they also have their menu of choice or their order of choice. But here's a beautiful example on how you use an emotional connection every one of us has with the brand to overcome rational arguments of why we shouldn't go to the brand. That's another example. But again, this is when you literally have negative associations that sort of like are factual, but that you cannot counter with better facts, if that makes sense.
On Brand will be right back after this.
Rinse takes your laundry and hand-delivers it to your door, expertly cleaned and folded. So you could take the time once spent folding and sorting and waiting to finally pursue a whole new version of you. Like Tea Time You. Or this Tea Time You. Or even this Tea Time You.
Said you hear about Dave?
Or even Tea Time You.
So update on Dave.
It's up to you. We'll take the laundry. Rinse. It's time to be great.
Now, back to the show. So we've been talking about McDonald's, and now I'm hungry. But that's beside the point. But you've worked with Hallmark, Harley Davidson, these brands that have all sorts of strong brand association. Can smaller brands put these insights into practice? And if so, what might that look like if you don't have a Procter & Gamble research budget?
Well, it's actually not the research budget. It's the money you invest in building your brand and how you invest it, right? So obviously, long-established brands have a strong advantage over newcomers in terms of the brand assets, the brand memories they have. But you'd be surprised. I'm always surprised when I see how many big companies that have 100 years history are not leveraging and harvesting the assets they've created over the last 100 years. They always try to come up with something new as opposed to harvesting the strength, the associations they have. That surprises me always. For newer brands, I think there are two things. It's extreme focus and extreme differentiation. And what I mean with that is we know that new brands need associations that give consumers a reason to switch from another brand to them. So basically, if I have a new brand of energy drink, I need you to switch from Monster or Red Bull or whatever else you're drinking back to my brand. So you need an association that does that. But then you also need to really stand out. And that's where I see the biggest challenge for most brands is we all say, oh yeah, the brand is different. But then you look at the brand in the context of its competitive environment, and there is nothing different about it. I use in the book the example of the chocolate category. When you go to the chocolate aisle, you have browns, you have blacks, you have darks, you have darkers and lighters and stuff. But it's all the same visual stimulation, so to say. Whereas a few brands like Tony Chocolonely, they have blues, yellows, red. They really literally stand out. So a small brand really needs to radically stand out. And that is not easy to do when you're managing the brand because you think, well, my black is blacker than the black of my competitor. That should help me stand out. It's like, no, it really doesn't because consumers don't make a difference. So being able to do that is essential. And initially I thought, it's a subjective impression I have, but then I found a study from Ipsos, a big global research company, that showed they tested over 5,000 brand assets with basically logo, color scheme, characters, and all these kind of things. around the world with thousands and thousands of consumers, and they realized that, or they learned that only 15% of all brand assets tested out of 5,000, 15 really stand out. That means they stand out as, ooh, I recognize the shape of a Toblerone. It's a triangle. And I associate this with Toblerone, the brand. So it's really the two elements is I recognize it as a standalone and I associate this with the right brand. So only 15% of 5,000 plus assets being tested, which really shows they all look alike, or people don't invest enough into them, or you think they're different, but they're not different enough to stand out from competition. So it's really radical focus, understand how you're going to steal share from your competition, and then radical distinctiveness, stand out. And research also show that even if you sell chocolate or whatever it is, even unique, if you want to stand out among the podcasters, if you always have a banana in your hand in every podcast, this is going to be more effective than not doing anything. So that's it. The distinctiveness doesn't need to be tied to who you are. And a banana is a simple distinctive example, so yeah, those are the two things a smaller brand would need to do.
I don't have any bananas nearby. I do have some orange peels because I had a snack right before we hopped on.
Orange peel works. You have to mention it though because they're hard to recognize. That's a
banana.
I know,
and it's a little tiny orange, so it's a complex association. It's back to the drawing board.
It's going to take time.
So, in thinking of the time and the planning on this, is there a simple way for marketers listening to audit their current brand associations and have an idea on what might be in people's heads?
So I should pay you for that question, Nick. Thank you so much. Because on my website, I have an online survey. You can take it. It's free. It's a 22 questions, something like that cover all the principles that are described in the book. So all the principles that are data validated and scientific, and that allows you to understand how good am I in building my brand, in all the efforts I am, and then it breaks it down into internal alignment. How aligned is our executive team around that? Because that's often how close to consumers are we? How much do we understand them? A whole 4 or 5 question focus on the quality of your brand positioning, because that's another thing is the association that make out a brand positioning need to fulfill a series of scientific based criteria to work. If it doesn't, it's not going to work as well. Then there are sort of like 10 or so, 14, I forgot, rules on how to build strong brand association networks in the mind of. So all that is known. So all you do is you fill out these, 20 questions, and within a minute you get an automated analysis of your brand situation with advices and tips on what to do to remedy that or to change that. Or if you don't want to take an online survey, you can go to my website and download all the scorecards that you can fill out yourself. And again, it gives you tips based on the assessment that you come up with. So it's very simple, and it's so much simpler than you think it is. It blows my mind.
Well, it's like the classic case of we don't have time to get into all of that because we're moving so fast today. And something like this, go find the form, fill it out. And as you were saying that, it also made me think, I wonder if it would also highlight if there were different answers from different people in the organization and what that might mean too. Is that take it off the rails, or does that mean that there's something bigger to explore?
No, that is the second question, I think, in my questionnaire, because one thing that is obvious is that, and I see that a lot in the day-to-day client I interact with, is there is not alignment on what the brand is or is supposed to be. So I just finished a workshop where the purpose, literally for 2 days, we just focused on getting the executive team to align on what the brand is in light of competition and stuff like that. Because if let's say we both run a company and we both have a different perspective on what the brand is or should be, how do we expect to run a marketing program to execute against two different strategies and expect consumers to think, oh yeah, I'm going to mix what Nick and Ulli have in mind, and that's what I'm going to come up with. That's what the brand is for me. It doesn't work. And I think there is data from Kantar that shows that clarity of perception, so for consumers to have a clear image of what the brand stands for, represents something like 70% of the brand sales. So it contributes to 70% of the brand. So that's what I mentioned. There's data to show everything nowadays, which is just mind-blowing. So clarity and alignment of executive team within the organization. Without it, you might as well save the money and donate it to UNICEF or another organization. Really.
Yeah. And again, worthwhile reminder that it is absolutely worth your time. So we've talked about different brands, brand associations, and it occurs to me that I kind of, over the nearly 600 episodes of the show, ask people for a brand association as my wrap-up question. I don't call it that, but it is, of course, the brand that's made you smile recently. So what's a brand association of many that's top of mind for you, Ulli?
So you warned me already, and I'd had 45 minutes to think about it, and I didn't really come up with anything. I gotta say, so that's another interesting thing, how brand associations work. One of the strongest brand I prefer the most is Kit Kat. But Kit Kat and the brand has been around for 80 years, 70 years or something like that, around this idea of take a break, take a Kit Kat. And what I associate with it when I was a student still, or just starting my career, I was very much into watching case studies and the reels, advertising reels of, the Cannes winners and stuff like that. And Kit Kat for me was always associated with tremendous British, but tremendously funny and impactful advertising. Like, to give you an example, I need to look it up again. There's a photographer in a zoo in front of the bay of a panda. And you can see he's waiting for the panda to come out of his grotto. And so he can take a beautiful picture of the panda. And he waits and he waits and he waits and nothing happens. And then eventually he says, you know what, I'm going to take a break. So he turns around, turns his back to the pen and opens a Kit Kat and really enjoys the Kit Kat. And behind him, you see the panda on ice skates that comes out and starts to ice skate on his little surface. And does, flips and pirouette. Basically, all the things you wish you would be able to capture on camera. And then the guy finishes his Kit Kat, turns around, and the panda disappears again. And I've seen this like 25 years ago, but that's what I associate with Kit Kat. And when you look at the advertising they do today in the US, you just wonder, well, if I had hair, I would pull my hair. But this shows you also how powerful advertising can imprint a brand in your brain. So every time I think about Kit Kat, I think about that specifically. It's so bizarre.
Well, it is an on-brand example for you, Ulli, because it is sounds like a powerful brand association. So you talked a little bit about the audit earlier. Where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Thanks for asking. Best place is LinkedIn. Type my name into LinkedIn and I'll pop up. Or you go to firstthetrousers.com. So it's first-the-trousers.com. And there you will find on the homepage also the link to the online survey or link to the various scorecards that you can download without any obligation. And, you got to give me your email address. That's the only obligation.
It's a small price to pay for some big questions answered.
You can get all that for free and use it and apply it immediately to your job.
Awesome. Well, we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can always find at onbrandpodcast.com. Ulli Applebaum, thanks for being on brand with us.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Always a pleasure.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Hennica Watkins-Porter hosts The Entrepreneurial You, empowering entrepreneurs with insights on leadership, business, and success. Hennica, tell listeners what to expect from your show.
So we provide innovative business strategies and practical solutions to common entrepreneurial challenges.
And where can people subscribe?
Find us at hennicawatkins-porter.com, as well as the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcasts.net, or search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.